My name is David, 21 years old, a college student in Boston, Massachusetts. And I died on October 15th, 2024. My life before that fateful day was, in many ways, unremarkable. I was a junior studying engineering at Boston University, a prestigious school that demanded both intellect and resilience. I lived in a cramped apartment just off campus, splitting rent with two roommates who were always buried in textbooks or out at parties. To make ends meet, I worked part-time at a cozy little coffee shop called Bean and Brew, where I served lattes to stressed-out students and tired professors. In my free time, I prayed. Prayer wasn't just a habit for me, it was a lifeline. My mother, Ellen, had raised me to see prayer as a way to connect with God, to find peace in chaos, and to draw strength when life felt overwhelming. My mother was the cornerstone of my world. She'd raised me single-handedly after my father died in a car accident when I was 5. I still remember her sitting me down in our small apartment in Worcester, teaching me to fold my hands and pray before bed. "David," she'd say, "when you talk to God, He listens. Always." Those words stuck with me, guiding me through the ups and downs of growing up without a father, through the challenges of school, and now, through the darkest moment of my life. 2 weeks before October 15th, 2024, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The doctors were blunt. The cancer had spread, and her chances of survival were slim. I was in the consultation room with her when the news came. Her hand trembled in mine, her face pale but composed, as if she were already preparing herself for what lay ahead. I, on the other hand, felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mother was the strongest person I knew. How could this be happening to her? I took a leave of absence from school to stay by her side at Massachusetts General Hospital. The days blurred together in a haze of sterile white walls, beeping monitors, and the faint smell of antiseptic. I spent hours sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each labored breath. When she was awake, we talked about the past, summers spent camping by Lake Quinsigamond, late nights baking chocolate chip cookies, or quiet Sunday mornings at our small church in Worcester. But most of the time, she slept, sedated by painkillers, her face peaceful yet hauntingly fragile. I prayed constantly. I prayed for a miracle, for God to heal her, to give her more time. I prayed for strength to keep going, because the truth was, I was exhausted. I barely ate, surviving on vending machine coffee and the occasional granola bar. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I didn't want to miss a single moment with her. My friends tried to help, dropping off food or texting to check in, but I pushed them away. All I could focus on was my mother. On the evening of October 15th, 2024, my mother finally fell into a deep sleep after a grueling day of tests and treatments. Her face, illuminated by the soft glow of the hospital room's lamp, looked serene for the first time in days. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But then my stomach growled, loud and insistent. I hadn't eaten anything substantial all day, and the hunger was becoming unbearable. I decided to slip out to the hospital cafeteria to grab a sandwich or something to quiet my stomach. The hospital hallway was cold and quiet, lit by flickering fluorescent lights. My sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as I walked, each step feeling heavier than the last. I made it only a few feet before a wave of dizziness hit me. The world spun, my vision blurring at the edges. My head throbbed, my heart pounded in my chest. I reached for the wall to steady myself, but my hands were shaking too much to hold on. Before I could call for help, my legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere impossible to describe. The space around me was vast, filled with a warm, golden light that seemed to pulse with life. There were no walls, no ceiling, just an endless expanse of radiance. My body felt weightless, as if I were floating in a sea of warmth and peace. The pain, the exhaustion, the fear, they were gone. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly alive. Then I saw him. A figure stood before me, tall and radiant, dressed in a flowing white robe that shimmered with light. His face was kind, his eyes filled with a depth of compassion and understanding that pierced my soul. I knew instantly who he was, Jesus Christ. But he wasn't the stern, majestic figure I'd imagined as a child, staring down from stained glass windows in church. He was gentle, approachable, like a friend you'd known your whole life. His smile was warm, and it made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child curled up in my mother's arms. "David," he said, his voice soft yet resonant, like a melody that filled the air. "You've been carrying a heavy burden, haven't you?" I couldn't speak. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I nodded, overwhelmed by his presence. I felt exposed, as if he could see every fear, every doubt, every moment of weakness I'd tried to hide. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only love. "You've prayed faithfully," he continued, stepping closer. "For your mother, for those you love, and for the world. Do you know what prayer truly is, David?" I shook my head, unsure. I'd always thought of prayer as asking for help, a way to cope with life's hardships. But the way he asked made me realize there was more to it, something deeper. "Prayer is your heart speaking to God," he said. "It's a bridge between you and the Father, a way to bring light to the darkest corners of the world. When you pray, you're not just asking for miracles, you're joining in the work of healing, of love, of hope. Your prayers matter, David. They matter more than you know." His words hit me like a wave. I'd never thought of my prayers as powerful. They were just words, whispered in desperation or gratitude, something my mother had taught me to do since I was a child. But Jesus' words made me see them differently, as a force, a gift, a way to touch the lives of others. "But what about my mother?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. "I'm so afraid of losing her. I don't know how to go on without her." Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with understanding. "Your mother is part of a greater plan, David. Trust in the Father's love for her and for you. Keep praying, not just for her healing, but for the strength to walk the path laid before you. Prayer doesn't always change the outcome, but it always changes the heart." I wanted to ask more, to beg for assurances, but he raised his hand, and a warm light enveloped me. It was like being wrapped in a blanket of love, a sensation so profound it brought tears to my eyes. "Go back, David," he said gently. "You have much to do. Carry my love with you and never stop praying." My eyes snapped open to the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment filled my ears, and the sterile smell of the hospital flooded my senses. I was lying on a gurney in the emergency room, surrounded by doctors and nurses. My body ached, my head pounded, but I was alive. "You're awake," a doctor exclaimed, his face a mix of relief and urgency. "You collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. You haven't been taking care of yourself, son." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as sandpaper. A nurse handed me a cup of water, and I sipped it slowly, the cool liquid soothing my parched throat. Then I remembered my mother. "My mom," I croaked. "How is she?" The doctor's expression softened. "She's doing much better than we expected. Her latest scans show the tumor has shrunk significantly. It's remarkable, really. We'll keep monitoring her, but this is very encouraging." Relief washed over me, and tears streamed down my face. I whispered a silent prayer of thanks, feeling Jesus' presence lingering in my heart. His words echoed in my mind, "Keep praying." I knew in that moment that I would never stop. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, tests, and cautious hope. My mother's condition continued to improve, defying the grim prognosis we'd been given. The doctors called it a medical miracle, but I knew it was more than that. It was the power of prayer, of faith, of love. I returned to school, but I wasn't the same David who had left. The encounter with Jesus had changed me forever. I started sharing my story with those around me. At first, I was hesitant, worried people would think I was crazy. But I couldn't keep it inside. I told my roommates, my coworkers at Bean and Brew, even strangers I met on campus. I spoke about the peace I'd felt, the words Jesus had shared, and the power of prayer. Some people scoffed, dismissing it as a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Others listened, their eyes wide with curiosity or hope. One person who listened was Sarah, a classmate who had always kept to herself. She approached me after a lecture one day, her voice quiet but earnest. "I heard you talking about your experience," she said. I lost my brother 2 years ago, and I stopped believing in anything. But what you said about prayer, it made me want to try again." That conversation led to the creation of a small prayer group on campus. Every Thursday evening, a handful of us would gather in a quiet corner of the student union, sharing our struggles and praying together. Sarah became a regular, and over time, I saw her smile return. She told me that prayer had given her a way to grieve, to heal, to feel connected to something greater than herself. Watching her transformation strengthened my own faith. My mother was discharged from the hospital in early 2025, though she still needed regular checkups. Her strength returned slowly, and with it, her warmth and humor. We spent evenings together in our apartment, cooking simple meals and praying side by side. Those moments became my anchor, a reminder of the gift I'd been given. Not just my mother's recovery, but the chance to see the world through the lens of faith. By the fall of 2025, I knew I wanted to do more. Inspired by my experience, I joined a local volunteer organization that supported cancer patients and their families. I spent weekends at the hospital, sitting with patients, listening to their stories, and praying with them. I met people from all walks of life, young and old, hopeful and despairing. Each encounter taught me something new about resilience, about love, about the power of human connection. One patient, a 10-year-old boy named Ethan, left a lasting impact on me. Ethan was battling leukemia, his small frame frail from months of chemotherapy, but his eyes sparkled with a quiet strength. I sat with him one afternoon, sharing my story about my mother and the moment I met Jesus. Ethan listened intently, his hands folded in his lap. When I finished, he said, "I want to pray like you do. Can you teach me?" We sat together, hands clasped, and I guided him through a simple prayer. His voice was soft but steady, and when he finished, he looked up at me with a smile. "I feel better," he said, "like someone's with me." In that moment, I felt Jesus' presence again, as if he were standing right there, watching over us. My story isn't one of grand miracles or divine spectacles. It's the story of an ordinary young man who found extraordinary strength in faith, love, and prayer. I don't know what the future holds, for me, for my mother, or for the world. But I know that as long as I keep praying, I'll never walk alone. And I hope as you read this, you'll find your own reason to pray, for yourself, for those you love, and for a world that so desperately needs hope.